teams. Starting to look at Azure policy is one thing we're starting to do right now. Starting to really leverage a lot of cloud tools, which has really actually come in handy with this pandemic and the shelter in place. We've been able to roll out new services in a day for some things. We've leveraged PaaS quite a bit lately. We've leveraged the PaaS-based SQL servers, PostgreSQL servers, a lot of app services, Azure functions. We have several containers that we do use, but we're still working on how to use the more scale out containers. And then we're also now looking at the SQL data warehouse to migrate our data warehouse tools to. With that, I mean, I think part of it is, again, circumstances are right. I think as Scott mentioned very clearly, the demand was there. I think our business really understood the need. They saw, a lot of our customers are in the cloud. They're, and they demand us to be at that pace. I think another thing I want to leave off on are just lessons learned. I think you really need partners. I think it's great to have someone who understands the cloud platform early on and can do that knowledge transfer with your team. And then tagging is the biggest thing for me. That's how we manage costs. That's how we can do some automations that we use. It's been very, very useful for us. With that, open for any questions people might have.
Hey Ryan, this is Andrew. I did have one question. I think you answered some of it, which was you talked about tagging being extremely important. I guess if you were to advise somebody who maybe is at the beginning of the cloud journey, like what would be the one or two things that you'd say, definitely do this first or take this approach?
Tags. I mean, I can't say it enough, is tags. You gotta think about what you're trying to do. We're not necessarily a chargeback department, but we do leverage kind of a showback model. And so making sure you have the right cost center data in there, making sure you have the right application so you can track, the cost per application or per environment. You can track, the RTO and RPO in environments, so you can automate backups to a degree. The other thing I would say, and this took us a bit, is understanding resource groups within Azure and understanding how to group them together that's beneficial to your team. As an example, one of our initial deployments, we were using resource groups for an entire application in IaaS. I think doing that for a PaaS application makes a lot of sense, but when you're doing it with an IaaS environment, there's a lot of pieces there. And when you maybe decommission one server and spin up a new one, you always forget pieces. I mean, that was our lesson. So for our infrastructure as a service environment, our resource groups are, again, and this could be kind of a legacy approach for us in that, we've kind of modeled after VMware. A folder is built and all the resources for that server is in that folder. And that's kind of how we're using resource groups for the infrastructure as a service environment. But, you can do whatever strategy you have, but you have to be committed to it.
So Ryan, on this is Rick, on the topic of tagging and, implementing tagging in the cloud is, air quotes, easy because anything's possible, but it takes some rigor in terms of having defined processes already in place. Like, where were you guys maturity wise in terms of what you were doing on-prem from a naming standards and tagging perspective? And if you would say you weren't as mature as you maybe could have been, what was the lift for you guys operationally to get there in the cloud? Because I think that's a big topic, and I think making sense of the bill and being able to do that showback angle, I could totally understand why you're banging that gong right now. But for folks who don't feel like they really have a lot of rigor today, how hard was that for you guys?
I won't lie, it's a little brutal. We had a really good naming convention for our servers. That was really clear to our team. We didn't, with the naming convention we had, we didn't really need to tag things in our VMware environment. So moving to Azure and requiring tags, we had 4 tags we required: division for the showback, application, environment, and point of contact, like an email point of contact. And it took a lot of like me going to meetings and explaining to people how important it is, because people want to go in there and play. You have all these tools available to you. Why do I need to tag? It's just me doing it, and there aren't that many people here. And I'm going there, and it took a while for a lot of our team to get on board. And then even when they were, we didn't use policies yet at that time to control what could be entered. So one person might say application as a tag and X application as a value. Next person will say applications. And then it just throws everything off. Or initially there's a problem with like if someone had a capital in it or someone did all caps. Inside of Azure, cases matter. And so they are different tags. And we are able to leverage Power BI heavily for the cost tracking. And I was able to get around it for some part. But sitting with people, especially once people saw the bill and the cost, then they understood. A lot of them understood. Or we bought a third-party tool to kind of help manage costs. Parking VMs is a really powerful tool that we use. That's all done by tags to automate it. So if you make a mistake and put development for the environment for a production thing, that thing's going off. It will be turned off and you won't be happy. So it's a lot of opportunity there.
So Ryan, what kind of workloads did you guys migrate? Like, is it all Microsoft applications or like, what challenges did you face? And that's my one question. Second question, did you guys use any infrastructure as a code for setting up the infrastructure in Azure?
I don't think we did use any infrastructure as code. I'd have to farm that out to our cloud architect if he's available. In terms of what kind of workloads we brought over, we're a Microsoft shop. I'd say 95% of our servers are Microsoft Windows-based systems. We do have some Linux, though. We did already have containers that we had to move. One of the tricks we did encounter is we leverage a cloud-based solution for tracking earthquakes across the state. And it wasn't very well maintained by the community that had built it. It was an open source kind of solution. And they had built it in AWS. And, we had made a decision, we're going to be in Azure. So, I'm blessed I have an amazing development team because they were able to look at the code and like, oh, we got this. And they magically made it come up in Azure for us. So it looked really good. So we had tricks there. We had some legacy systems that, I think because of some of our skill sets, they proved a little bit more challenging than we had expected. But overall, the majority of our systems, again, they're Microsoft Windows systems. They're DNS-based, traffic forwarding. So you move the system, you change the IP, run a command to register DNS, and you're off and going.
Okay, thank you.
I see our cloud architect added a comment that case sensitive was important. And then he said, we have started to leverage Ansible scripts for deployments of some applications. I forgot about that.
Can you address like how you either currently do or plan to do in the future, like enablement of people within your organization? So like, do you have a service catalog where people can spin up resources as they see fit? And if so, how do you contain that both from a cost perspective as well as kind of like a just an overall governance point of view?
So we're just getting started on that road. We have enabled access for certain people. Again, very important early on, and great to partner with Rick and actually Kyle and Dan on this, was designing our subscription environment based on part of that need. Making sure that, we had some kind of simplicity to us being able to grant access to a certain unit to manage all this, the resources that are in their environment. What we're doing now is, the ability to, again, like I said, we have an automated system that automatically parks certain VMs. We're working on providing an interface for our staff to, if they're designated the access, they can override our parking on maybe a test environment or dev environment for a few days as they test maybe an update or something like that. We're also, we do have a service catalog, and we have been looking at integrating that with Azure so we can make it so that people can only deploy the machines we say there. But we're also looking at Azure policy to say, if you're in these groups, you can only deploy a B series VM or a D series VM, which are really the two standards we've fallen on. And I think I didn't mention that, and I do want to bring it up. There are a ton of series of VMs there, and getting your head wrapped around those beforehand is beneficial. We ended up standardized on B series for all of our basic servers, web servers, etc., and D series for our database servers and such. And that's something to be careful of. Before we had policies in place, our people on our infrastructure team could go in, and if you're not going through every checkbox, you're going to deploy a VM as maybe an A series or an E series. Establishing those guardrails. Azure policy, again, we're just getting started with it, so we're not terrible experts on it, but it seems to do a lot of the things we're looking to do.
Those are good questions, Andrew. I was actually thinking of asking the same thing. I don't know if James is up for speaking or not, but I'm just genuinely kind of curious, like from a technical standpoint. I mean, you guys have been using Azure as your primary, data center now for quite some time. Have you gotten around to, building standardized images, and even if you're just like ARM templates for VMs, or is it still very much a manual process to deploy those things?
We haven't really gotten to the point of standardizing images. That's actually been a discussion between me and one of the other cloud guys that I'm working with, as trying to make more of a standardized image for deployments. But currently, we're just really coming down to when we're spinning up VMs. It's based on the marketplace at this point in time. But we've come to find specific reasons now why we need a standardized image.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking. I've heard of this. Park my cloud. Park my VM. I can't quite remember the name of it.
Park my cloud.
Yeah, because I mean, the alternative to that, if anybody's curious, like and they're pretty upfront in their marketing and sharing this, that the Microsoft provided solution for doing it works and it's great, but you got to kind of buckle up to get it deployed right, which a lot of people would rather have a nice UI to front something that helps them quick and easily shut down VMs after hours and turn them back on, and realize those cost savings. I think the next evolution to that is, as you guys start, and I've seen this at other departments, like as you start to consume more of those serverless and platform as a service services, and the things that are not as easily, like there's maybe not a shutdown button and a startup button, or you know what I mean, right? So the equivalent to that would be, or the parallel would be like templatizing the entire solution, using ARM templates or something like Terraform and Ansible, and shoving it through a pipeline so that you can repeatedly, deploy it, do your development cycles, tear it down, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's just going to sit out there. And if you built it manually, which would be a very painstaking thing to do, not that coding it, and templatizing it is an easy feat too, but at least when you're done with that ladder, you can shut it down and turn it back on, and the same you would with your Parkway, VMs or what have you.
Yeah, exactly. As we look at Azure DevOps, that's one of the things we've been talking about is, if there's no active development, as we have PaaS dev and test environments, blow them away to, again, save us some money when they're not being used. Well, also, I'd be interested in doing that. We have some applications that have specific submission timelines. And, if we could find a way to have, a dummy waiting page. So, there's something to hit at least when it's not in session, and just saying, hey, we're not available quite yet. But again, purging the system, the back end. So, again, we're saving cost, and, to a certain degree, it's a level of security protection that there's nothing there for anyone to try to hack or anything like that.
Yeah. Were there any, last one more question, I'll open it up in case anyone else has any others. Were there any surprising benefits that you guys realized in moving your infrastructure to the cloud that you weren't anticipating? You hear about potential cost savings and avoiding CapEx, and you hear about, the scale and the speed to deploy, but was there anything that you guys realized, or that, was a timely nice to have that you weren't anticipating from your move to Azure?
I can't think of anything I wasn't anticipating, but I can say that it really quickly actually saved me. We had a project, come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden it needed, if I remember right, like 5 terabytes of storage. I think even more than that. Yeah. And a dedicated server. And for us, it's like, if it was on the infrastructure side, if it was at our data center, I'd have been like, you're gonna need to give me quite a bit of money to buy a new SAN, and you're gonna be waiting several months. Instead, we're like, oh, no big deal. Come on. So, I mean, I think really quickly we were able to prove that we were ready to respond to a lot of things.
Gotcha.
Scott, did you get a lot of pushback when you were presenting this idea of move to the cloud of, well, but is it secure? And if so, how do I know that it's secure? And how, we're locked down in our data centers, now we got to move to the cloud. Was there a lot of conversation around that, or I guess how did you deal with that scenario?
Yeah, no, there really wasn't. I mean, the way I would characterize it for you is this. I mean, I mentioned up front some of the, there's at OSHPD, there's about 5 major program areas, and again, one, is heavily involved with engineering and architecture, and those are very technical customers, and they were the one that had the big demand. They were always sort of interested in what Ryan and we were working on. And wanted to be involved and things like that. So I think all the other program areas were doing basic business productivity kind of work. So I think what Ryan and I really did was, if we had to make the case with that group, the sort of the tech savvy, heavily involved group, and everybody else just came along. So I think that's where we talked a lot about cost, because that's the group we were going to every, Ryan, 3-5 years to buy $1 million in server equipment. I think we were coming up on another one where we were going to do we were thinking about 2.5 million, and they would have been the group. So I think it was a way to win them over to sort of the cloud. and see the sort of the advantages of us being more consistent, I think, in the cost, and to Ryan's point, much more responsive. I think because that was the one group that was always coming up with new demands and sort of expanded, which is great. I mean, they're great customers to work with, always interested in doing new things, and so it was a great partnership. And then again, all the other groups basically came along. I mean, it really wasn't an issue. They weren't interested in getting into the details. They just wanted to make sure their stuff was available when it was available. And to be honest, Ryan, I don't know that we ever. I think all the discussions around information security were our discussions. I don't know that customers ever got too deeply into that. I think the facilities folks were more concerned that we didn't have stuff available to their customers. They were more concerned that we weren't making everything widely available. And I think to this day, Ryan still has to sort of keep some of those pieces reined in, because not everything can be accessed by external stakeholders.
Yeah, I think all our security systems are really internal IT. To what Scott said, our department is pretty forward thinking. The businesses are, and so a lot of times they're always asking for these cutting edge solutions, which is actually again, our move to Azure has enabled us to be able to respond much faster at a much cheaper cost, up front for them. And we can just experiment with things, without worrying like, hey, we're gonna spend $500,000 and do something. Now it's like, okay, we're gonna spend, $60 building this VM.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would emphasize that, is that it's nice to be able to work with customers and not start the conversation. Well, we need this much money if you want to do that, and so it does change the shape of the conversation. I see there's a hand up.
Yeah.
How do you raise a hand? I want to raise a hand.
Come on.
Yeah, no, I raised a hand. Yeah, can you see me? This is Zen.
Hey, Zen.
Yep.
I'm hanging out here in New York, and I was wondering, particularly the industry I've been in is in public sector, and I was wondering if anybody had any insights, and maybe Scott, you do, about selling to the public sector and how they can leverage CapEx versus expense funding to leverage cloud services, because that's been a huge challenge. And right now, New York City is really under a lot of pressure to save a ton of money without a lot of money coming in. They're going to have to move to the cloud. I can tell you 99% of New York City is not running in the cloud right now, and it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah. No, I won't kid you. I think that circumstance exists very much in California as well. Ryan said it, and I don't. It's not to my credit or Ryan's credit. I mean, I think the customers we work with are forward thinking, and you sort of need that. And you also, I think we were interested in wanting to move forward and embrace cloud. But you're right. I mean, I think there is a business case to be made. In terms of the benefits, the advantages over capital, cost for this. I think there's all kinds of advantages, but there is. I would make it. I think it's culture. I think there's certainly in California state government. Again, there's 150, 160 departments, and sometimes the culture is just one that there's a comfort level with being able to look at a piece of equipment and feel like it's more secure. And Ryan, am I wrong in that? I mean, it's a cultural issue, and it's just going to take time, and it's going to take more examples that are successful and more, to your point. Then I think we do need to make the business case. I think it's there. It just needs to be well articulated, and there needs to be some champions that are willing to carry that. Again, we were fortunate. We're in a forward-thinking organization that were certainly willing to go with us, and so that we could provide them really strong services in return for sort of going in that journey. But I think there's a case to make. I mean, I'm interested in what Ryan and Rick. I mean, you must be involved in trying to make this kind of business case over and over again. I mean, what's the advice? You see the landscape. I don't think New York is any different than California.
No, I talking to my peers in New York, I mean, look, the reality is, public sector as a whole, we have the luxury of having a crystal ball. You look at the commercial sector in N-2 years, and that's where commercial, private sector or public sector is, rather, state and local. So the good thing there is, to Scott, I think you're spot on. Having that kind of culture and buy-in, and having a customer that's willing to go with you is an imperative. There are some customers that are going to have to they're going to be the laggards, right? And there's always a bell curve of the early adopters. Then there's the big middle segment, and then there's the folks that'll never come over their dead bodies, right? And I think that, when you think about it always takes like a little win, right? Ryan, you talking earlier, and Scott, you talking about, it wasn't this major cost savings thing for you guys. It was little things like, we had a business unit come to us and say, we need this and we need it now. And the old answer was, that's months and millions of dollars. And the new answer was, that's fine. I could do it pretty quickly and I could spin up for you. And then you just pull on that thread, right? Of, okay, well, I did it once that way, we could do it this way. The CapEx versus OpEx thing is really interesting. California seems to have really accepted that concept quicker than some other of my peers' markets. I don't know where New York is specifically, Zen, but with the state essentially saying, we're not going to do monetary commit purchases, we're only going to roll with a pay-as-you-go model, it kind of was a forcing mechanism, and in many ways, it was liberating for a lot of the conversations I was having, because procurement folks just had to come to terms with IT as the new utility, as a business model. Yep. Right, and so I think we've been lucky in that regard of not having to struggle with, how do I manage my budget from a CapEx versus OpEx model, and then it becomes about use cases, and use cases are pretty easy to drive towards. And so if you have a good fit and the technology's there, that's where I think a lot of that adoption is going to come. The big elephant in the room is, with COVID and with all the cost and vendor consolidation that is certain to come, is what is that going to do? And I think what it's done is people have in their personal lives adopted Zoom or Teams or Google Hangout, whatever your platform of choice is. Look, I mean, all of us are everyone who's talking is using video now. That wasn't a common occurrence a few months ago, right? And I think the whole kind of mind shift is happening real time right now, to where people understand the cloud is a viable option now. It's mature now, and I think that the use cases are there. And so, Zen, I don't know if that's a good answer for you. There's not a silver bullet, but I think the timing is everything. And I think these are super interesting times for people that want to adopt cloud, because it's now perceived as lower risk, as viable, as feasible, and there's lots of options out there.
And thank you for that. And I agree. I think that the opportunities are really going to be tremendous. And I'm starting to see it in New York right now. Working in the public sector, I'm starting to see the turnaround, and people are like, well, we can't be the same. So it's going to be a really exciting time, and I look forward to potentially working with any of you in the future about, even though you're out in California, I do a lot of these groups. It's going to be huge. So this is great.
Hey, I'm gonna jump in here. Hey, Scott and Ryan, good to see you guys, even though it's virtual. Ben here. Hey, Ryan, I really appreciated how you started off the conversation. There's so much pressure out there around multi-cloud, and you guys had to pick something. And I think we're kind of at the same boat. Let's pick something and go forward here, because there's so many options and it's so complex out there. So once you guys have gotten a little bit more mature, have you moved into more multi-cloud services, or are you still finding you're getting everything from one cloud provider? And obviously, this is a Microsoft, forum. So, but hopefully, we could be honest with each other.
You guys want me to leave?
No.
Cover your ears for a minute, Rick.
No.
You know these as well as I do, Rick.
Yeah. What I'm seeing is where we're going is when things are leaving our IaaS environment, they're going to SaaS or PaaS. And in a lot of cases, SaaS. Unfortunately, like a lot of the vendors we work with have prioritized like pushing their sources to SaaS. And you're eventually you have to go to their SaaS solution. So I don't know that I will go to like 2 IaaS servers. I think I'd just stick with Azure as IaaS. We're happy with all the PaaS services, and I'll be honest, it is a lot to take in as you start developing in PaaS. It has been, I would say we've been incredibly successful rolling out PaaS, but just within the Microsoft environment, it's still quite a bit. I don't think we'd be ready. I'd probably lose a lot of people if I said, hey, you can go look at all the Amazon stuff too. I'd probably have one person that would be cheering and 40 others that were walking out on me. So for the time being, I think we'll still at least be in IaaS and PaaS, strictly Azure, but we are rolling a lot of services to SaaS solutions.
You actually just made me think of something, Ryan. I find often that it's like the technology part of it, I wouldn't say is the easy part, but is maybe easier, right? Because you can spin things up really quickly and you can start using things and you can start playing really quickly. How was your experience in training staff that already existed into a different mindset of how to utilize the cloud and leverage the cloud effectively? And kind of going along with that, like what sort of training path, I guess, would you have provided, or did you provide, or would you have provided for those folks?
We have some people who've leveraged. We have a Microsoft's Unified Support, and they have an academy in there of online training that has some decent Azure trainings. So far, that's where we've had the most success. I haven't personally seen that many like professional PaaS-based trainings. A lot of our IaaS deployment was knowledge transfer. It started with knowledge transfer from the vendor partner that we leveraged, and then it took the center of excellence kind of concept, where I had James and another of my staff that really knew it, and then it's just slowly baby steps. It went from 2 people who really know it to 6 people who really know it, from 6 people who really know it to 12 people who really know it. And again, I think it's taken us a bit, but I think now we're really comfortable in the IaaS environment. The PaaS environment it's a massive culture shift. Because Rick probably gets like 5 different emails from me every week. Wait, there's a new service here? What's this? Where should we go? There's a constant thing. Okay, where do we use Azure Function? Where do we use App Service? Where do we use Logic Apps? Where do we use Data Factory? And what size to use? Because we want a certain integration. It's a lot to figure out. And I think, I'll be perfectly honest here. I think AWS has the same problem. Is they're new products and they're changing all the time. And the documentation can be kind of hard to find sometimes as you try to build them. And it's something we I think have to balance out. Again, I'm fortunate my staff love to be challenged, and they'll bang their heads on these things to get them going. And we get a little bit smarter. And it's just keep on growing there to get that. But it's the PaaS rollout has been, it takes a while some people jumped right in. Again, like, the normal adoption curve. Some people dropped in. Some people are like, they started out telling us how we were to fail and it wasn't going to work. And then when it worked, they're like, oh, you guys got lucky. And, they see it again. And now they're like, oh, okay, maybe I should try something here. And they see something else and they're like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. It's like, okay, so we're still in that transition with, I think, PaaS.
Did people really say you got lucky with that? Rhetorical question.
Not to my face.
Yeah. So
Sometimes you think it.
So I'm kind of curious, and I'm sensitive to is the Microsoft guy here. My assumption is that it's the same regardless of which cloud provider you're working with. The hyperscalers are going to support the adopters, especially at this stage of the market, right? So I want to preface that on the front end, but I'm kind of curious, knowing your comments there, Ryan, of it is hard to keep up with this stuff. And I'll tell you, even internally for us, it is hard to keep up with this stuff. And that's some people's full-time job. So I'm kind of curious, how do you work with, or what's kind of the secret sauce to getting your cloud provider to give you the support that you need so you could be successful? And that's not a loaded question. I mean, that's in my mind that's sincere, because I think that's candidly that's a big part of the success criteria that I see. I have some customers that no matter how much I offer help for, they just don't want it. Then they bang their heads and then they tell me it doesn't work. Then I have other folks who come to us and ask for help, and we help. But I'm just kind of curious from your side of the table, what is the right way, or at least what has been the right way for Oshped to leverage the resources that are there and made available to you guys?
That's a good question. I mean, to me, I guess it's not just a cloud thing. I mean, you have to have great relationships with your vendors. I mean, if you don't have a great relationship with a vendor, you're probably not having a great experience with the product they've provided you. And you probably are looking at other products, honestly. So I think it's important, that, you and I, we met quite frequently as we were considering the Azure environment. And it is comforting to me when, I'm talking to the vendor and they're like, oh, I have these resources, and, you have the Scott Grunemeyer, who was able to kind of talk about the architecture and, really helped educate us around the areas where I was most concerned, which was cost. I say I'm going to come out below a certain number. I need to come out below that number. And so it was reassuring, and I think we built on the successes together. As we got more successful, we got more comfortable reaching out. I mean, I know our team, I am Scott and several other members of your team to be successful. I'd be surprised if you weren't close with your vendor partner on deploying something like this. I think that'd be very, very tough. Or at least having a third-party partner that can help you along too. Maybe that's what you can do. But going on your own, whew.
Continuing the same question, Ryan, how important do you think is the maintenance and operation phase when you're working with a vendor? Because once you do the deployments and stuff, so your staff might not be as up to the speed as the cloud and everything. So do you think having a maintenance operation phase with the vendor is going to help the state staff?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously it would. I hesitate because part of my thing is, and my staff can either love or hate me for this, is we include knowledge transfer as the vendor is helping us deploy, and to a lot of it, the way we structure a lot of our engagements is the vendor helps us the first 2 or 3 people see it, and then our staff are taking it over. Because I can't just have a vendor here all the time, and if I allow staff to just sit back, then they're not learning anything, and we're going to be dependent on that vendor for forever. And so a lot of times what I do is I just tell my staff they have to do it. What's a saying? Fail fast and keep learning.
Yeah.
So Ryan, speaking of failing, what do you think your biggest mistake was out of this whole episode journey?
My biggest mistake, when we initially deployed, I I probably would have, understanding more, like being able to early on lock in what we as a serving allow. Because we did have kind of every flavor under the sun. I probably could have been more adamant with my team on the importance of the tag and the importance of lining it up exactly like as we were envisioning, because we have had to go back and fix those things. Those were the two toughest. I think the other part was communication within IT. When we first moved, anytime there was an issue, it was the cloud's fault. I'm like, these are just servers. These are just on-prem servers. It's nothing different than being at the data center. So when there was an outage, it's Azure's fault. Oh no.
You skipped over the part where you blame the consultant first, and then Azure second.
Must have forgotten that one.
It happens. So you guys also mentioned early on that you did something with load balancers. Was that like a global load balancer? And I was wondering if you added any other new kind of web-based technology in there, like web application firewalls or anything like that in your deployment.
We bought a new load balancer. I'll tell you, it's a NetScaler. So we used products that we were familiar with, and we had partners across our agency that also used it that we could fall on for that. Again, as we've grown, especially as you start using PaaS services, you start to have to experiment with products that Microsoft has. And I've actually been pretty impressed with the application gateway. And I think we've used Azure Front Door, which have provided some pretty significant tools to protect us.
Okay, and one last question. Did you look at, it sounds like you were mostly in a development shop or whatever, but did you look at all at using Azure MFA for any particular reason for your deployment?
We use Azure MFA everywhere.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, our whole department gets to love me when they get MFA'd every morning.
Gotcha. So we've been talking to Rick about that a little bit, and so one of our questions is around the cost model. Is that working okay for you? Is cost effective at the 3 cents per transaction or whatever it is?
The Azure MFA is 3 cents. I don't get that charge.
Oh, probably because you're using it internally and it's not for end user authorizations.
Yeah,
or excuse me, public user authorizations.
Okay, through Azure B2C.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so we're not doing that. We just have gone down the path of starting to leverage Azure B2C. Our intent is we built in integrations with Facebook, Twitter, Google, and Microsoft into it. I hope people leverage one of those to sign in and not create an account on ours.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate all you guys' insight and stuff.
Problem.
Any other questions?
What are you guys focusing on now, Ryan? What's next in your, obviously you've got a lot on your plate and it's probably derailed a lot of things you were planning to get around to, but in regards to cloud computing, like what's your guys' kind of 1 to 2 year plan?
We're flying on the cloud. Everything we have is kind of centered around this. So our development team is in the middle of a pretty big development effort to move one of our patient data collections into another system. They've actually started trying to transition pieces of that, leveraging Azure PaaS solutions such as Azure Functions and SQL Elastic Pool. We've also moved the entire development suite's SQL environment to a PaaS-based SQL environment. We've deployed 3, James, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we have 3 full PaaS solutions to date. leveraging app services. We do have a container deployment. We're looking at moving that. It's still an IaaS-based container deployment, but we're looking at AKS. Gosh, we're doing a lot. A big effort we're looking at right now is Azure Data Lake and Azure Synapse as our new platform for like modern data management. And so we're looking at a lot around that. That's a good amount of time, and I've been engaging quite a bit on that. What other things are we doing? Like I said, we're scaling up our cloud governance. When we deployed initially, we kept it significantly like a typical infrastructure deployment, where as the infrastructure team deploying these things. So now we're trying to enable self-service. So we're expanding out role-based access control. We're starting to develop Azure policies and take advantage of built-in Azure policies. We're looking at Azure Blueprint and Azure templates to be able to automate deployments. As we said earlier, we're trying to expand out our Ansible development to automate system deployments. And then several things around security. Trying to, this isn't an Azure side of thing, but in Microsoft 365, using privileged identity management as a way to control access into the Azure environment. We'll also be looking at MCAS as an integration with our VPN to control access to certain environments rather than just you get access to everything. I'm trying to think of other things.
I mean, that's a lot.
We're gonna be busy.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions? No. So now, James, you could tell us the real story. Ready to go.
There's nothing more I need to add. Ryan hit off on pretty much everything that we're doing. So
Well, that was really good. I mean, I really appreciated hearing, straight from you guys, kind of what your experience was. We don't get an opportunity to hear that a lot.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yep, that was fun. Yeah. Hey, James.
Hey, Scott.
Good to see you.
You too.
You too, Richard.
Good to see you, Joe.
If there's no more questions, we could probably end it sooner than planned.
Let me put him on the spot, but is Jim speaking next time? Did we already determine that?
Looking forward to it.
Do you want to then just give like a real quick, I don't know, like couple minute overview of what you think you're going to be able to share next time?
Yeah, my specialty is in cloud orchestration. And what I'm going to be presenting next time is a reference architecture with some open source code to make it fast to be able to implement, a way of using Azure pipelines to orchestrate infrastructure as code in multiple clouds. And the reason I'm focusing on this, and I think this is such an important thing, is that in a lot of organizations, the process of change is broken down at the point of environments. There's a whole cultural process about getting people to think agile and to use agile tools like Azure DevOps or Jira. And a lot of companies there's so Microsoft ingrained that they're using Azure DevOps, but how do you get that into your environments? So the idea is, let's take something like Terraform and let's look at how we can take Azure DevOps as a planning tool, Azure Pipelines as a build and release tool, and connect that with code repositories to be able to put out a clonable, scalable, elastic infrastructure as code utilizing tools like, for example, Terraform. And it's just all in a, my idea is that when we start as an enterprise, we're building an enterprise architecture that has a platform in it that's got all these solutions, and somehow we need to look at these things as vehicles. So if we want to change the way all of it works, we start with a vehicle that's a go-kart that works right away. Everybody can understand it, it's quickly implemented, and that gets people starting. And from there, we start to say, hey, you know, because we've got this working in our organization now, it would not be that much more work to turn this go-kart into a school bus. And if we wanted to make it into a Humvee, it wouldn't be that much work either. And so we get a template to be able to implement in lots of different types of applications. And the talk's going to be centered around using Azure pipelines to orchestrate infrastructure as code from that starting point.
Very cool.
Nice.
Love it. It's a good topic.
I think that sounds awesome, and I can't wait to learn how to turn a go-kart into a Humvee after turning it into a school bus, personally.
Yeah, well, a friend of mine used to go to Laguna Seca and race.
Oh yeah.
And
Okay.
what those guys do is the car pulls into the pit stop, they rip apart the transmission, put it back together, and get back on. And that's how it works when you're looking at high-performance vehicles.
That's awesome.
All right. Thank you very much, Ryan and Scott, and also thank you Jim for volunteering for the next meetup. We would appreciate more volunteers if let's say you have any topic that you want to see or you want to contribute. I mean, you're all welcome. We want to keep the communication open and more very informal and so that everybody could benefit out of it. So.
Well, maybe to that, Uday, I mean, we've got a live audience here. I mean, are there other suggestions? I love that we're getting towards the pipeline into the discussion, but what else would be relevant to our earliest adopters here in the user group?
I'm just going to make an assumption that somebody wants to say container, so we can go ahead and put that one on the list.
Awesome.
Obviously, all things around automation, too. Even perhaps a section on blueprints.
So on the topic of blueprints, I'm actually I'm working with someone. I'm quite intrigued by how under the radar, like blueprints is flying in terms of security standards. Did you know that they have blueprints for CIS and for NIST standards that you can apply to subscriptions that already exist? Because I originally thought of blueprints like, oh, this is for when you need to spin up a new subscription. It does it according to this template, but you can go and the NIST and CIS blueprints have all of the Azure policy definitions already generated in them.
I didn't know I could apply it to something existing.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, that would be a great topic too. We can hit on, a security topic down the road too.
Sure.
Zen also mentioned in the chat anything around IoT as well, which would be a really interesting topic too.
Very cool.
Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Looks like we have no more questions. We can end if everybody has no questions or suggestions.
Yeah. Thanks for your guys' time.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, James. I appreciate the whole team weighing in. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next month.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye now.
Yeah. Bye.
Yeah.